Under President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, America is more divided than ever. Crime is on the rise across the nation. Illegal immigration is surging as the southern border remains in crisis. And the cost of living is soaring to unprecedented levels. These critical issues will be top of mind for voters as they choose between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump in a matter of weeks. Sky News Digital Originals presents The Divided States of America. There is no greater concern for American voters than the cost of living crisis. A recent Gallup poll found 52% of voters rate the economy as an extremely important influence on their vote for president. This is the highest since October 2008, during the Great Recession. In the last few years, everything from groceries to petrol to everyday bills have dramatically increased. And in her typical style, Kamala Harris has been vague on how she plans to tackle the rising cost of living.
Her great insight into politics is that we should go forwards, not backwards. And actually, as I mentioned in that piece in the New York Post, when it comes to the economy, going backwards a bit wouldn't be such a bad thing. The economy between 2016 2020 did far better, and that's until the COVID disaster, did far better, certainly, than the Harris-Biden administration has managed economically in the 4 years since. And you simply need to look at any of the figures, whether it's median household income, whether it's things like the rise in median household income for Black Americans, by the way, which was better under Trump than under Obama. If you look at just things like inflation, which is, causing just devastation to Americans paying their bills each month, or you go to something like the attainability of getting on the household ladder. First-time home ownership is tougher now than it's been in America at any point since 1984. And so when Kamala Harris says, we need to go forwards into this great world, which, by the way, I've been the second most important person in for the last 4 years, but give me a chance for another 4 years because that's where it'll really improve. I think people just need to look at the figures. The figures in the economy under Biden-Harris have been really pretty woeful. And Harris should certainly come up with a better plan than let's go forwards if she's going to persuade the electorate in November.
I'm worried about something far more sinister. The idea to raise capital gains tax to make America uncompetitive. You got to think about capital. We're the #1 economy on earth. Most foreign capital wants to invest in America because it's competitive. But when all of a sudden you make us, and you're looking at the G20, all countries where your sovereign wealth, you want to put $100 billion to work in infrastructure, you care about capital gains tax. You care about the corporate tax rate. Remember, 82% of jobs in America are created by private companies that are corporations. That's who America works with and for, and how we pay for our society. Why do you want to punish them for success? And so at the end of the day, when you make yourself so uncompetitive in the plethora of economies that compete with us and all of a sudden say corporate tax rates are the highest now, we're in the bottom quartile of competition, it'll be like what happened when we had 28% plus corporate taxes when companies started going to Ireland. We've already tried this. It doesn't work. And I want to hear her answer that question. I really, really want to hear how she feels about the #1 economy. Remember, she's the steward of the #1 economy on earth. This is a really, really, really bad idea. Incredibly bad policy.
Time and time again, we've shown you images from the southern border, illegal migrants freely crossing into the United States, as the Biden administration fails to fix the ongoing humanitarian crisis. And now, in the final few weeks of the campaign, this endorsement has come for Donald Trump from the people who are tasked with protecting the border.
He has always stood with the men and women who protect this border, who put their lives on the line for the country. A man who knows about putting his life on the line for what is right. This November, we have a choice to make. Continue the chaos, allow the criminal cartels to control the border, to allow drugs and fentanyl across our country, or put an end to it once and for all. On behalf of the 16,000 men and women represented by the National Border Patrol Council, we strongly support and endorse Donald J. Trump for President of the United States.
In 2016 and 2020, Donald Trump used a tough border stance as a political weapon. Chants like "build the wall" quickly becoming synonymous with his campaign. And now in 2024, Republicans are using Kamala Harris's role as border czar as a key political weapon.
The Democrats' whole strategy when it comes to illegal immigrant crime is to just act like it's not happening and use their allies in the media to just not cover it. So Bill Clinton actually probably raised this issue of this specific case with Laken Riley to many voters who didn't even know about it, because these voters who would be at this event just watch, MSNBC or CNN that don't cover these horrific crimes, and now they know about this particular crime. But this election, Chris, is starting to feel a lot like 2016, back when illegal immigration and all of the impacts of it were the main driving issue for voters. I live in Massachusetts. Even people here on the coasts are talking about illegal immigration very seriously. The entire country has become full of border states, not just Texas and Arizona anymore. This is a big issue.
I mean, this is someone who in 2018, I believe the year was, compared ICE to the Ku Klux Klan here in America. This is someone who, when she was campaigning for president in the year 2020, she said that she wanted to make illegally crossing the border not an actual crime punishable by time in prison or in a DHS or CBP facility, but rather just a mere slap on the wrist or a monetary fine at best. I mean, this is someone who comes from a border state, California, but in every position that she has ever held back in her home state in California, whether it was DA, whether it was Attorney General, whether it was U.S. Senator from that state, has done everything possible to abet the flow of illegal aliens coming across that very porous southern border. And certainly her time as Vice President of the United States, I mean, anyone who could even look even remotely objectively at the situation at the U.S.-Mexico border would deem that the past 3.5 years have been an unmitigated, catastrophic, capital F failure. And again, Kamala Harris is now trying to embrace this tough on border, tough on crime rhetoric. She's out there with all these ads in these heavily Hispanic southwestern states like Nevada, Arizona, states that are leaning Trump, saying that she is somehow like Sheriff Joe Arpaio in Arizona, that she's like a staunch border hawk. I mean, this is Soviet-style Pravda disinformation. I mean, they are just lying to you. I do not know how else to say it. So again, the question at this point is whether or not the voters in the swing states, including those two aforementioned southwestern states that I mentioned, Arizona, Nevada, are they going to fall for the lie, or is the actual record going to come up? And again, the responsibility for making sure that the conversation stays on these substantive issues and the track record, it, in theory, ought to be the media. They're not doing their jobs. What that means is that the Trump-Vance campaign has to break through that fog and to get the message out there. They have to remind the voters, remind them, the moderates, the independents, the swing state voters, just how terrible her record is, including on the all-important immigration issue.
Like, maybe do a little slow roll on the unveiling of your new word campaign in the media and with the top Democrats, because it's just so obvious now. It's less impactful. I get it. She wasn't the border czar, wasn't the border czar, but wasn't the border czar. By the way, she was 100% the border czar.
Yes.
And he's weird. He's weird. He's weird. By the way, there's absolutely nothing weird about JD Vance. Nothing weird. You're weird, Kamala, with your weird coconut tree word salad, speaking to America like we're 3-year-olds. Yes. And we all know it. So all of this is a projection. And I do think if you're anywhere right of those far left Karens for Kamala or white dudes for Kamala with your land acknowledgements and your don't criticize BIPOC, you understand who the weirdos are in this race.
And more than anything, they're just shameless liars, debasing themselves to defend a political candidate, which, guys, that's not what the role of the media is supposed to be. They're supposed to hold political candidates to account, not shamelessly shill for them and attempt to rewrite history. I mean, we all know, we all remember Joe Biden very clearly put Kamala Harris in a significant role in regards to his immigration and border policy. And guys, if it had turned out better, if the results were good rather than the hot mess at our border that we've had instead, they would be giving her all the credit in the world for it. But because the border has been a huge liability for this administration, they're now trying to gaslight us and pretend that Kamala was never really involved. She was only given minor duties. It's not true. Many of these mainstream media outlets literally reported at the time that he was making her border czar, or the border point person, the immigration point person, whatever you want to call it. We all remember this. And just because she failed at that job and the administration failed to secure our border more broadly, they're now trying to rewrite history rather than acknowledge those failures. And it is just so disgraceful that the mainstream media is doing their bidding instead of pointing out this reality that the White House wants to run away from.
Crime has emerged as a central issue in this election, with many Americans expressing concerns about feeling less safe in their cities. On the international stage, the world is facing significant turbulence. The Middle East is in one of its most precarious states in recent history, with escalating tensions spiralling out of control. Meanwhile, in Europe, the war between Russia and Ukraine drags on with no clear resolution in sight. The next US president will play a critical role in shaping international diplomacy and navigating these global crises.
The United States has directly involved itself in the war in the Middle East by deploying that anti-air system, and they're going to send 100 troops. It's the first time in the history of Israeli-American relations. Every American president in my lifetime, including President Reagan and President Eisenhower, avoided this kind of thing. It tells us that Israel is on the ropes here and that President Biden is going to pull out all stops while he is president of the United States. What it also tells me is that, and I don't think this is a secret among people in your business. I think the internal polling among the Democrats has told them that Kamala Harris has lost the presidency. She's not going to win. When she got the lucky draw a couple months ago, 28% of the American people thought that Biden was going in the wrong direction, and she says that there's no separation between her and Biden. So people have woken up, and I think a lot of Trump is sort of planning his return. This idea that I think President Biden is pulling out all stops to help his allies, that is, both Ukraine and Israel, before they lose the election is the intended. But for a guy who wanted to stay away from the forever wars, he's got himself a beauty.
In Michigan, a critical swing state, we've talked about it a lot on the show. That's right, you'll be there. You picked that over Las Vegas. Bad decision. Anyway, so there's 100,000 Palestinian Americans, citizens, legal to vote and so forth, who may vote in this election. They really don't like what's happening in Gaza, and they're never going to vote for Donald Trump. But the question is going to be, will they withhold their vote from Kamala Harris because they don't like her position on Israel? If they do, that little small subgroup could change the outcome of that state, and that state could change the outcome of the election. That pattern, LJ, is being repeated again and again, whether or not it's Hispanic casino workers in Las Vegas, Palestinian Americans in Michigan, or white suburban housewives in Atlanta. These subgroups are what everybody's sort of focusing on, because the election is going to be so tight that a small change in those subgroups can change the outcome.
Turning Point Action spokesperson Caitlin Sinclair joined Power Hour to discuss all the latest from America in the final few weeks of the election campaign. Caitlin, thank you for joining us on Power Hour. First of all, we've just watched that train wreck interview with Kamala Harris on Fox News. What's your reaction to it?
Well, whoever encouraged Kamala Harris to do an interview with Fox News host Bret Baier, I want to personally send a thank you note to whoever that staffer was, because ultimately this interview has just ruined her entire campaign. I think every American should watch this interview with Kamala Harris and Bret Baier, and it will really show she cracked at the first non-softball interview that was in front of her. And these were not got you questions, right? If every American watches this interview, Bret Baier was not trying to catch her in a I got you moment. These were policy questions. These were agenda questions. These were questions about the last 3.5 years of her administration questions. And she completely failed to answer any of them.
Well said. The US Border Patrol Union, representing 16,000 members, has officially endorsed Donald Trump for president. Here is Border Patrol agent Paul Perez speaking about it.
If we allow Border Czar Harris to win this election, every city, every community in this great country is going to go to hell.
It's interesting, Caitlin. Kamala Harris couldn't really answer as to why the Border Patrol Union is endorsing Donald Trump and not Kamala Harris. But what impact will it make?
Yeah, kind of weird for the border czar when the Border Patrol Council and Union doesn't endorse her. Kind of weird, right? And I want to talk about the significance of this endorsement happening right here in the state of Arizona, where, of course, we've seen all of these crossings. Now, at this point in the administration, every state has turned into a border state, but there was such power and significance in this Border Patrol Council, all 16,000 members endorsing Donald Trump for president here in the state of Arizona. And of course, Kamala Harris was not the one to call families of Laken Riley, Molly Tibbetts, Rachel Morin. Guess who was there for those young females that were killed at the hands of illegal immigrants due to Kamala Harris and Joe Biden? It was neither of them. It was Donald Trump. Donald Trump truly is the man that cares about females, that cares about a safe and secure border. And Kamala Harris, if you watch that interview, not only did she get angry, but she was actually screaming at the host when she was trying to blame Donald Trump for the policies that have existed under Joe Biden and her administration. And the host called her out for it.
Yeah, she couldn't keep her cool, could she? But on that point of Donald Trump supporting women's issues, we know that former US President Donald Trump has vowed to keep trans-identifying men out of women's sports if he's elected. He made this pledge during a Fox News town hall in Georgia.
How do you plan on addressing the transgender issue in women's sports? I have 9 grandchildren, 6 of them female, all playing sports, and we are very concerned for their safety, not just on the field and the courts, but in their locker rooms as well.
Right. It's such an easy question, and everybody in the room, and you know that answer, we're not going to let it happen.
Caitlin, it's a key issue for women in America, isn't it?
Absolutely. And while the left took the most wedge-dividing issue in this country and tried to make it the centerpiece of this entire campaign, which, of course, is the issue of abortion, there are real issues that matter to females. And I, as a young female, am sick of being wedged into this very narrow box. Does the left think that we're not capable of thinking outside of the box here? We only have one narrow way of thinking. Does the left think that women are so reduced to one single issue or reduced to voting based on a gender? Because that's not the case with the millions of American women who are concerned about our safety and about the safety of our daughters, my future daughters. And Donald Trump's pledge right there really shows where he stands.
Well said. Look, President Biden, can you believe he's apparently still running the country? He's around and he's been speaking in Pennsylvania, and he seems to be holding on to hope that Donald Trump might be going to jail.
The same guy who has 3 other major cases waiting for him when he loses. And by the way, 34 felonies. So far, he hadn't got sentenced. He got the sentence kicked back, but I want to watch that sentence. Look, Donald Trump's not running for you. He's running for himself. I think he's running to stay out of jail.
Still hard to make any sense of what he says.
Come on, man. Did Joe Biden just wake up from his nap time there? I mean, this is so pathetic on the part of Kamala Harris and her campaign that is trying to have Joe Biden, people like Bill Clinton, Barack Obama come out of retirement. I know Joe Biden is still our sitting president. That's very hard for your viewers to even comprehend. But please, just stay in the White House, go to sleep, eat your ice cream, because having these people, again, like a Bill Clinton or Barack Obama on the campaign trail is actually only hurting the Kamala Harris campaign and making Americans more aware of how there is no good Democrats that actually care about the American agenda.
Yeah, I think the more that Joe Biden speaks and Bill Clinton speaks, we're just seeing the support for Kamala Harris go down. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
More Donald Trump ads, actually. More
yeah,
Donald Trump ads.
Yeah, that's true. He's just got so much material. But on Joe Biden, he spoke with Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky this week discussing efforts to boost security aid to Ukraine. He's announced a new $425 million military aid package to Ukraine. What reaction can we expect the reaction to be from the American people when Americans are still recovering from Hurricane Helene and Milton with really minimal government assistance?
I think this outraged all Americans who heard this news today. Sending millions to Ukraine, sending $157 million to Lebanon recently, billions of dollars spent on welcoming illegals into this country. And yet we have American tax-paying citizens that are struggling, that just had their livelihoods wiped away by these two hurricanes. And what do they get? A lousy $750 and zero help from this administration. I think every American has every right to ask questions, demand answers, and be completely outraged. But how much longer are we going to let this go on? I hope every American out there is relating these disastrous decisions by the Biden administration to the minute they put that piece of paper in the ballot box, because they are absolutely correlated here. This is a result of the disastrous administration that keeps putting us into crises after crises, funding their elite agenda and proxy wars. And I think Americans are waking up, and we are quite frankly sick of it.
Finally, we know people on the left are just obsessed with Donald Trump. They're obsessed with hating on Donald Trump. And there's a new film about his life in the 70s and 80s in New York called The Apprentice. Here's a look.
I'm rich, I'm handsome, I have a great family, I'm going to be in the #1 building in New York. Listen to me. You're going to have a life you can't even dream of, Ivana.
Donald Trump has responded, posting on Truth Social, calling it fake and classless. That's a probably fair assessment. What do you make of it, Caitlin?
Well, I think we have to look at the timing of when this film just came out, right? But I did some digging, and I can tell you this anti-Trump movie did only 12% of the business that, for example, the Ronald Reagan movie that just came out, 12% of the business that the Reagan movie did at the same time when it opened just 6 weeks ago. So I don't know, are Americans even going to the movies anymore? They're facing crises after crises, have to worry about putting food on the table, filling up their gas tanks, worry about their children's safety, walking these dangerous liberal streets. Do they have time to go to the movies? I mean, complete out of touch Hollywood elites for you.
Absolutely. And they're just obsessed with his parent life story from their point of view in the 70s and 80s. They won't let it go. Turning Point Action official spokeswoman Caitlin Sinclair, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
God bless. Thank you.